Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name's Cole Ramirez, and I live for speed. I've raced everything from open-wheel formula cars to GT prototypes on tracks across the world. People see the helmet, the suit, the roar of the engine, and think it's all about glory. But when you're inside the cockpit, it's about focus, precision, timing. Every second counts. The Outbreak started on a day like any other, hot asphalt, fans screaming, the air crackling with anticipation. I was in the middle of qualifiers for the Desert Apex Grand Prix, held at an isolated track deep in the Mojave. It's one of those circuits surrounded by nothing but sand, scrub, and sun. A place where the only thing louder than the engines is your heartbeat before the green flag. That morning, there was a weird tension in the paddock. Some of the pit crews were quieter than usual. One of the mechanics from a rival team had gone missing overnight, and people whispered about strange behavior from a couple of drivers. Honestly, I chalked it up to heat exhaustion or nerves. The radio chatter before qualifying was scattered. Spotters were missing and emergency crews hadn't shown up. That was the first red flag. Still, when it's go time, you push everything aside, helmet on, gloves tight. Engine lit up like thunder. I rolled out onto the track, the sun hanging low like a warning flare in the sky. The first lap was smooth, but as I approached turn 5, something caught my eye. A marshal's post, empty, no flags, no signal. I blinked, refocused. The next post, also deserted. My crew chief's voice cracked over the radio. "Cole, return to pit now." His tone was flat. No explanation. Just that single command. I slowed the car and made my way back, but as I turned into the paddock, the world I knew, clean, precise, scheduled, was gone. One of the pit garages was engulfed in smoke. Cars were abandoned mid-tune. Tools scattered like someone left in a hurry, and then I saw the first one, someone stumbling through the lot. It was Jace, one of my team's tire techs. His face looked wrong. Sunburnt, dry, and tight, like he hadn't slept in days. But his eyes, those were the worst. Glazed over, locked in a kind of hungry daze. I stepped out of the car just as he lunged. He wasn't just staggering. He attacked, no hesitation, no words. Just a blur of limbs and growls. I barely dodged him, adrenaline taking over as I sprinted toward the trailer. I slammed the door shut and jammed a wrench into the handle to keep it sealed. Inside, the radio crackled again. My crew chief, Darren, was still on the line. "Cole, listen carefully. We've lost contact with the outer perimeter. Something's happening in the city. People are changing. It's spreading fast, real fast." I pressed the headset tighter to my ear, trying to stay calm. "What do you mean, changing?" But he didn't answer, only static. Then, a different sound. A siren, distant and eerie. One of those emergency tones you only hear during drills. Except this one kept looping, echoing across the desert. And underneath that, screams. I crouched inside the trailer, heart pounding louder than any engine I'd ever driven. Outside, Jace was still dragging himself around the paddock, bumping into things, clawing at doors, making low guttural sounds that didn't sound human. I knew I couldn't stay in there forever. I had water, a few snacks, and my racing suit, not exactly survival gear, but I had something better. My car. The GTX R12 was parked just outside the trailer. Its engine still warm, fuel tank 3/4 full. It was built for speed, not safety, but it could outrun anything on wheels. I peeked through the blinds. Jace was gone, or at least out of sight. I counted to 3, yanked the wrench from the door, and bolted. My boots slapped against the concrete. I reached the car, yanked open the door, and threw myself in. The engine fired up instantly, its growl grounding me in something familiar. I locked the doors, slammed it into gear, and peeled out of the paddock. The rear tires screeched across the asphalt as I headed for the service road leading out of the complex. As I crested the hill at turn 11, the full scale of the disaster unfolded in front of me. The parking lot was chaos. Vehicles crashed into barriers, alarms blaring. People, if you could still call them that, were staggering between rows of cars. Some chased others. Some were just eating. I don't want to describe it. I can't. Let's just say it wasn't something I ever thought I'd see outside of nightmares. I veered off-road, cutting across the desert toward the old access route that only the crew knew about. The GT tore through the sand, shocks groaning with every dip, but it held strong. I made it back to the main highway after about 15 minutes of brutal off-roading. The road was nearly empty, except for an overturned transport truck and an abandoned police cruiser, both still idling. I slowed for a second, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. But the second I stopped, movement exploded from the ditch beside the cruiser. 2 figures lunged from the shadows. I barely had time to react. They slammed into the hood of the car, snarling, hands smearing the windshield. I hit the gas. The tires screamed, and the GT launched forward. One of them rolled off the hood, the other clung on for several seconds, banging on the glass before flying off as I swerved hard to the right. My hands shook, but I couldn't stop. I needed to reach the city. I needed answers. And maybe, just maybe, I needed someone to tell me this was all just a horrible mistake. As the sun dipped lower, the sky turned a dull orange, casting long shadows across the cracked highway. I passed a burned-out gas station. No lights, no people. Just silence. And then, my radio chirped again. "Cole, if you can hear this, I'm holed up at the Apex Fuel Depot, Northwest Sector. Use the maintenance road, gate code still 2517, hurry." It was Darren. Relief flooded through me like a cold drink on a hot race day. I still had a waypoint, a target, someone to reach. I took the next exit, tires hugging the road like I was back in a time trial, cutting through a darkening wasteland of empty lots, broken fences, and scorched signs. I didn't know what I'd find at the fuel depot. But it had to be better than what I left behind. Right? The Apex Fuel Depot sat behind a rusted chain-link fence just beyond an old airstrip, surrounded by towering fuel tanks and long-forgotten machinery. By the time I reached the access road, the sun had disappeared completely, leaving behind a bruised sky and the flicker of emergency lights in the far distance. I coasted up to the gate and punched in the code Darren had given me, 2517. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that sounded like the whole fence was protesting the effort, the gate slid open just enough for me to squeeze the GT through. I pulled up near the central office, a small, cinder-block building with bars on the windows and oil drums stacked like barricades around the door. One dim light flickered above the entrance. I honked twice. A figure emerged from behind the drums, flashlight in one hand, metal rod in the other. He stepped into the glow, and I finally saw Darren's face, grimy, pale, but alive. He waved me in. I parked close and grabbed my gear bag before following him into the building. Inside, the depot's control room had been turned into a makeshift bunker. Water jugs, canned food, a few cots. Radio equipment crackled quietly in the corner. "Glad you made it," Darren said, locking the door behind us. "Did anyone follow you?" "No, at least, I don't think so." He nodded grimly and tossed me a protein bar. I didn't realize how hungry I was until that moment. I tore into it without hesitation. "What's going on?" I asked, finally able to breathe. "What is this?" Darren leaned against the console, staring at the floor. "It started last night. Reports of people attacking each other downtown. The news said it was some kind of mass hysteria, maybe something in the water. But it spread faster than anyone could explain. People aren't just losing it. They're turning." "Turning into what?" He didn't answer. Just gave me a look that said everything. I sat back, trying to process it. "What about the track? Our crew? The drivers?" His silence was the only answer I needed. We sat in silence for a while. The radio picked up stray signals. Panic broadcasts, calls for help, scrambled emergency messages. That's when we heard it. Thuds against the metal walls outside. Not loud, not urgent, but steady, like someone tapping their fingers, waiting. Darren rose slowly and killed the lights. He motioned for me to keep quiet as he moved to the reinforced window. Outside, silhouettes. 5, maybe 6 figures, standing still. Faces turned toward the building. Then one of them stepped forward and slammed its palm against the door, over and over. I reached for the metal rod Darren had brought inside, gripping it tight. But they didn't break through, not yet. After 10 minutes, they wandered off, disappearing into the dark. We waited another hour before speaking again. "They're not just mindless," Darren said quietly. "They're hunting, watching." He stood up, pacing now. "I've been thinking of making a break for the Speedway substation. There's a helicopter pad there. If we can reach it, maybe we can find someone flying out of here, a pilot, military, anyone." I nodded. "I've still got enough fuel, the car's good to go." Darren gave me a half smile. "Then we move at dawn." Sleep didn't come easy. I lay on one of the cots, staring at the cracked ceiling, gripping the metal rod, heart racing. I was used to countdowns, green lights, lap times. But this countdown, it was the longest night of my life. The sun finally peeled over the horizon like a reluctant witness to the chaos. Golden light spilled across the fuel depot, washing the shadows away. But it didn't bring relief, just clarity. Now we could see how bad things really were. From the rooftop, Darren scanned the dirt road with binoculars while I checked over the GT one last time. Tires, good. Fuel, still holding. Engine sounded clean. I strapped in supplies. 2 jugs of water, a first aid kit, a flashlight, a fire extinguisher, and Darren's backup radio. "This is going to be tight," Darren muttered as he climbed into the passenger seat. "They were thick on the north side last night. We're taking the old access road behind the quarry, less traveled." "Works for me," I said. "Buckle in." He gave me a tired look. "You don't have airbags in this thing, do you?" "Nope." "Figured." We rolled out, tires crunching over sand and gravel. The GT was low and stiff, not built for off-road work, but I kept it slow and steady until we hit a stretch of cracked pavement that curved behind the ridge. From there, I opened it up. The car responded like it had been waiting to run, tires gripping the ground like claws. That feeling, just for a moment, made me forget what was happening. The car and I became one. Tunnel vision, wind through the vents, my fingers twitching at every shift. But the illusion didn't last long. We crested a hill, and just beyond it was a wreck. An old transport bus jackknifed across the road, doors torn off, windows shattered, and strewn across the ground. Movement. They weren't people anymore, just twisted forms, crawling, shambling, dragging themselves forward like broken machines. Their clothes were torn, stained with things I don't want to describe. Their skin looked dry, cracked, like parchment stretched too thin. "Punch it," Darren said. I didn't need to be told twice. I dropped a gear and surged forward. A narrow opening between the rear of the bus and a ditch looked just wide enough. We flew through it, the edge of the bumper scraping something solid as we passed. One of them reached out, grazing the side mirror, but we were gone. The road split a mile later, north to the airfield, west to the city. Smoke hung in the sky to the west. We went north, but not without a cost. "Rear tires losing pressure," Darren said, watching the dash readings. "Probably clipped something." I eased the car to a stop near an old hangar and jumped out. Sure enough, the rear right tire had picked up a shard of metal. I had a spare in the back, but no lift. We jacked it up using the extinguisher, careful and slow, switching the tire with shaking hands. I kept scanning the horizon. They weren't fast, but they didn't stop. And sure enough, they came. At first, just one. A limping figure out by the edge of the sand. Then 2, 3. More. "Darren, now!" I shouted as I tightened the last bolt. We threw the flat in the back, slammed the trunk shut, and dove in. They were closer now. I could see their eyes. Empty. Cloudy. Like they'd seen something on the other side and come back broken. We pulled away just in time, the car kicking up a cloud of dust as the pack reached where we'd been seconds before. I didn't speak for a while after that. Neither did Darren. Not until the substation came into view, a chain of low buildings clustered around a concrete helipad, and on the far side, a chopper. It was real. It looked intact, parked, quiet, blade still. Maybe someone had made it. Or maybe someone was still there. We parked 100 yards out from the substation, half hidden behind a sand berm. The chopper sat under the early morning sun like a forgotten toy. Military model, twin rotor. Could have held 10, maybe more. Darren scanned it with binoculars. No guards. No movement. "That's not good," I muttered. "Either they left, or they're still here, and not exactly themselves." We grabbed what we could carry. Tools, first aid kit, a crowbar Darren found in the depot. I kept the fire extinguisher, not ideal, but it was metal and heavy. We approached slow, weaving between the utility buildings. A stray dog bolted past us from under a trailer, nearly giving me a heart attack. It didn't look sick, just scared. The closer we got, the more signs we saw that something had gone wrong here. Gear scattered across the concrete. A trail of boots leading to a half-open hangar. A radio still crackling with static on the ground. "Hangar first," Darren whispered. We crept up and peered inside. 3 figures. Slumped, not moving. Darren raised a hand, signaling me to stay back as he stepped inside. He moved quietly, like he'd done this kind of thing before. I held my breath. 10 seconds passed, then 20. He turned and gave me the nod. "Clear, these ones." They didn't turn. They must have gone out on their own terms. No signs of a fight. I looked away, couldn't bring myself to stare too long at their still forms. All I could think was, they'd made it here, had a chance, and still didn't make it. Back outside, we checked the chopper. Doors unlocked, no fuel. Figures. Darren ran a quick systems check. Functional, batteries good, controls responding, but without fuel, it's a statue. I looked toward the substation's main building. "If there's fuel," I said, "it'll be in there." We made our way over, passing a busted drone on the steps. Inside, the place looked ransacked. Papers everywhere, cabinets open. But it hadn't been looted. It was panic. We found the fuel manifest and a storage key on a lanyard. "There's a reserve tank behind the building," Darren said. Enough to fill the bird, maybe more. We worked fast, carried over hoses, filled the chopper slowly, one tank at a time. It took almost an hour. The sun was rising higher, and with it, the risk. They found us again. I spotted the first one limping from the ridge. Then more, coming fast, not running, but moving with purpose, like they knew, like they'd followed the scent. I dropped the final fuel can and shouted, "That's it! We're full!" Darren climbed in and started the engine. The blades groaned, then spun, slicing the air with rising speed. I sprinted for the open side door. Just as I jumped in, two of them rounded the building. One lunged. I kicked, knocking it back, then Darren yanked me inside. He lifted off seconds later, the skids barely missing the heads of the growing crowd below. As we gained altitude, I looked down. The desert was no longer empty. They were out there, hundreds of them, some in clusters, others alone, wandering, all heading somewhere. Maybe anywhere people still existed. Darren flew us west, away from the substation, toward the edge of the city. The skyline was faint now, washed in haze. Fires smoldered on the outskirts. No movement on the roads. "Do you think anyone else made it?" I asked. Darren didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, "I think we're not the only ones. Just not many." The radio crackled. A weak voice, barely audible through static. "To anyone still out there. Safe zone at Fort Ridgeline. Repeat, Fort Ridgeline is holding coordinates," and silence. We looked at each other. A direction, a destination. Something to drive toward, even if the road was broken. Darren scribbled the coordinates from the radio transmission onto the back of a flight checklist. Fort Ridgeline, that's north-northeast, deep in the mountains. He traced a route on the dusty console. Plenty of terrain between here and there. If that message is legit, it's our best shot. I watched the horizon as the chopper climbed, the ruined city shrinking behind us like a bad memory. From up here you could see the pattern, the way the roads were clogged, how entire blocks looked abandoned, how some places still had small signs of life, faint, flickering. But there. "Looks like most tried to escape early," I said. "Didn't make it far." "Panic spreads faster than any outbreak," Darren replied. "People tried to run when they should have bunkered in, and the ones who hid, they're probably still hiding. Or worse." He guided the chopper low, hugging the contours of hills and valleys to stay off any watch lists or scanners that might still be running. Not that we knew if anything still monitored the skies. Still, it felt smarter than flying high and making ourselves a target for, well, anything. About 40 minutes into the flight, the engine sputtered. Not for long, just a hiccup, but enough to twist my stomach. Darren frowned. "Fuel gauge says full. Might be contamination in the reserve. If this thing stalls, we're gliding to the next hill." I gritted my teeth. "You sure you can land this thing on a slope?" He cracked a grin. "I can land anything once." Comforting. Below us, the landscape shifted from desert to forest. Thick pine groves, winding dirt roads, and narrow ridgelines. If Fort Ridgeline was up here, it had the advantage. Isolated, hard to reach, easy to defend. Or so we hoped. We spotted the fort just past a bend in the ridge. Concrete walls, solar arrays, guard towers. A flag still flew, though it was torn. The place looked battered but intact. Smoke rose from a chimney. Movement on the walls. Living people? Darren radioed in. "This is Chopper 7, inbound from Apex Substation. Survivors on board, requesting clearance." Static. Then a voice crackled back. Tired, rough, but human. "Copy that, 7. Land in the inner yard, be quick. Gate will open on visual confirmation. You've got 2 minutes before we close it again. The helipad was inside the walls. A tight fit. Darren didn't hesitate. Brace, we're going in. The descent was bumpy, wind gusting over the trees, the chopper blades chopping hard at the thin air. We came down fast, touched skids to the ground just as the gate began closing behind us. Armed figures approached. Not military by the look of them. Locals, maybe ex-police or volunteers. Hardened faces. Eyes that had seen things they weren't ready for. They helped us down, searched us, cleared us. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, we were led inside a place where the air didn't stink of fear. They had lights, food, people, kids. A nurse checked us over. A bearded man introduced himself as Sergeant Klein, former National Guard. He explained that Fort Ridgeline was one of the last functioning outposts in the region. Signal's been weak. We only broadcast every few hours now. Battery power's low. You're the first to respond in a long time. I looked around at the walls, the lookout towers, the solar rigs. You've made this place hold. Klein shrugged, for now. But it's not over. We've heard there are more coming. Herds, entire towns moving as one. The wrong sound brings them in. He turned to Darren. Can you fly? Darren nodded. Good, Klein said. We'll need that. Oh, that night, I lay on a cot inside the fort's main barracks. There were no sirens, no growls outside, no distant screams. Just wind, and the quiet hum of batteries and old radios. 12 hours ago, I was on the starting line for a race I'd trained my whole life to win. Now, I was just a driver lucky enough to still be breathing. But something had changed in me. This wasn't about speed anymore. It was about survival. And the next race? It was just beginning. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.